what kind of images come to your mind when you first listen and read the poem?
Well, at first, I feel that the poem is super descriptive, and I obviously saw like pine trees and snow and like white all over the ground. But I feel that the poem is almost half uplifting and half dreary and I don't know, a little bit dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So basically with setting, it's interesting because setting will kind of inform the mood of a poem or a story. I mean, even you can take the example of like looking around your house or looking around somewhere else that has a certain feel to it based on what you're seeing. So you said that in this poem, the images of the pine trees crusted with snow, all of the white, it feels a little bit uplifting, but also a little bit dreary in some ways too. What do you think is uplifting about it? Where would you say is kind of an uplifting place?
I feel that the very beginning, the first little section is a little bit uplifting when he talks about how the pine trees are crusted with snow. But I feel it starts to get dark as soon as we jump into the second section, and he says has been cold for a long time.
Yeah. Good. You definitely. Yeah, go ahead.
The January sun and the misery in the sound of the wind.
Yeah, good. So we kind of start off with this winter landscape, which we're not exactly sure what to think of it. It could be something really peaceful and beautiful that we're looking at. And then as we go down a little bit, we start to see clue words like misery, and down a little bit further, nothing. And so the mood starts to drop off a little bit and get a little bit more dreary. So I like that you picked that out just without even going through it and annotating it yet. So what we'll do now is take just a few minutes to underline anything else that sticks out to you. So we're going to look at metaphors and perspective, but anything else that you find interesting or want to ask about or bring in, we can look at together. So I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. And just let me know when you're ready. All right, so tell me a couple things that came up for you.
Well, I kind of, looking deeper into the poem, I feel that Stevens is trying to, I guess, give us this idea that he's in, I guess, two different realities, and there's one where he can look at it that it's kind of beautiful and pretty, but then on the other hand, even though it's still winter and the same weather, it can be almost negative and kind of dreary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that he could see them in two different ways and he could take away two different things.
Yeah. And let's go more into kind of the dreary part of it, or the part that has the nothingness.
Yeah.
So it kind of starts with this word misery, and we're looking through the eyes of the snowman. So the title of the poem is The Snowman, and if you picture a kind of a snowman on this barren landscape looking out, he's a part of his surroundings. He's made from his surroundings. He's made of snow. So is he feeling the misery, or do you think maybe there's this other person, the listener, who's coming in and he might have more of a sense of that misery? What do you think about that perspective, the snowman versus the listener?
I feel like it is a combination of both. I feel that the person or the snowman is kind of, he's living in this, so he also feels the misery, but when he looks out into the world, I think he portrays what he's seeing to be miserable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I feel like I don't know, I guess like the way he views the world, it might be like a deeper meaning as well, like winter in other poems that I've seen is related to death and horrible things.
Yeah.
And spring is supposed to be related to life and beautiful things.
Right. Yeah. So you're bringing symbolism. Great. Yeah. So the symbolism of winter, it usually relates to something dying off, or here there's this nothingness. There's nothing left for him. I would agree. It does have this kind of depressing feel at the end of it. And also, I should point out too that this poem was written in 1921, so it was after World War I, and there was just it was the first war that there was just this mass amount of death, really, that was felt globally. So Wallace Stevens is also coming at it from that historical perspective. Of course, with an author, we don't necessarily know what he's thinking or she's thinking when they come and sit down and write their poems or write their short stories, but we can kind of look at the bigger context of when they're writing and what might have informed their writing. So the structure of the poem, it has this word "and" repeated a couple times, at least 2 times, which I found interesting. So the poem feels very isolating. It's the snowman and this barren landscape. But "and" is a very connecting word. So we're connecting the stanzas, and it's almost like within this isolation, there's still this sense of connection, this connection that kind of runs throughout the poem.
The 2 things that I'm just looking at is where it says, "of the January sun," and underneath that, "in the sound of a few leaves."
Yeah, I like that. And the January sun, like if you can picture that in your mind, what the January sun looks like, it's kind of this very pale yellow, almost fogged over. So if you had said before that the spring and that sunshine and new life represents growth and possibility, and we're getting the sun, we're getting that symbol of new growth and possibility, but it's the January sun, so it's kind of fogged over. It's not as bright as it would be a few months later. And so we know that there's some sort of joy, perhaps, or some sort of growth, but it's very far off in the distance. Okay, so you said, more simply put into words that I understand, a tendency on the part of the individual. So I would say here, define what the tendency is. So more simply put into words that I understand, paranoia is a tendency on the part of the individual or group toward excessive or irrational suspicions. It's a little bit of a fragment right now, so I would just define what the tendency is.
Okay.
And also add in that "the" in front of individual, and the comments there, so you can always go back to it. For recently, I just said put a comma after recently. So recently, comma, I've noticed a change within myself. I'm constantly on the move, and my mind is always racing. I suggested putting a colon, changing the comma here to a colon. So recently I noticed a change within myself. I kind of went back and forth between, like, is this a comma, a semicolon, or a colon? Okay. My sense, I like the colon because you're defining what that change is, and the colon is kind of saying to your reader, okay, there's been a change in Jackie, what is it? And then you tell them right after that. The colon signals that. It need more so than just needing a pause there. I never wanted anything to jeopardize that one day my brother wouldn't trust me with her, or that she doesn't love me. Again, we're kind of jumping from past tense to present tense. So here I changed "doesn't" to "wouldn't," since you're speaking about the possibility that one day she wouldn't love you, not that it's true and that she actually doesn't. Of course she doesn't, but that you're worried that one day she wouldn't. So that's where I got to on your first page. Again, like bigger picture, I would have read through the whole thing, worked on reorganization, possibly, and maybe made it more concise or cleaned up some more sentence structure. But this was kind of just a first go around on this page. So any questions about that?
No.
Okay. And then you had said to jump down to the larger paragraph down here. So I will just go through my comments, and my mouse is a little funny too. The following nights were the hardest. When you lay in bed alone, you begin to cry, but then it turns into a panic attack. And then, so my last comment on here is just to change the formation of this sentence to something more like every night, starting a new sentence and then saying, every night I lay in bed alone, began to cry, and these emotions would turn into a panic attack. So we're back into the past tense.
Gotcha.
All right, so that's where I got to with my comments. Do you have any questions about anything I wrote, or anything you disagree with, or feel like you want to change?
No, I know you haven't gotten through the whole essay, but the thing I'm struggling with in the revision process is how to connect like everything that I've written and all my thoughts that I've put down, and how to make it more of an inquiry piece where I'm relating it back to how it relates to my paranoia.
Right.
And I guess I'm just struggling with trying to connect it back to my introductory paragraph.
Right. So your introductory paragraph was kind of defining what paranoia is. And in the introductory paragraph, you were talking about how I think you went from defining paranoia into talking about how it's recently bubbling up for you.
Yeah.
I would kind of, just off the top of my head, kind of suggest to not jump into what's happening now, like not go from this is the definition of paranoia, I've been feeling this recently, but then go into how it's been affecting you for a while now, so that you can kind of tie in, because you then jump back to when you were, I think 10 years old, when Megan was born. So the introduction doesn't really speak to that as much. I can scroll up and just double check that I'm right in saying that. Yeah, in your introduction, you kind of say, recently I've noticed a change within myself. But I think if you put forward that that anxiety is something that has lived inside of you and bubbled up in different ways for the amount of lifetime that you remember, because probably prior to 10, things aren't quite as vivid, or you were younger then. So so if you kind of say in that introduction that this has been a running theme, or how it's affected you over the long term, it might be a little bit easier to tie everything together, because then it's not just how you're feeling today, but how today is just kind of one of many days that feel similar to one another that have gone on for several years. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.